Quick announcement before we get into today's video. I recently signed up on Rumble, on Odyssey, and I'm also on Minds. And by the way, they enabled a new feature called Super Minds on that website. And if you send me Super Minds with questions, I'll try to get to them at the end of each and every video just for you guys. Links are, as always, in the description. Let's get into today's video. You know, because I make a lot of responses to the Young Turks, because I talk about how they're wrong, how they're ridiculous, I make fun of them for raging out for no reason and giving you misinformation that I think harms the country, you might be under the impression that I dislike TYT. You might be under the impression that I actually hate them, but nothing could be further from the truth. First and foremost, I make responses to the Young Turks, you watch those responses, and then money shows up in my account based on the fact that you guys love those responses, so that is all A+, first class all the way. But secondarily, they're actually not the worst offenders. They're not wrong 100% of the time. And one of the things that I'm noticing is that the Young Turks are really coming around on crime, and I think they might actually be watching my videos personally to get their talking points, because I think everybody on the internet copies everything that I do, because I am, in fact, the smartest person on the internet. Now, the issue at hand that we're going to talk about today is crime, and I'm going to back up the recent meltdown that Cenk Ana had against the left on this issue, because it is costing the Democrats elections, but more fundamentally, being soft on crime is very detrimental to our nation as a whole. So I'm happy to make common cause with anybody who's going to acknowledge that they were wrong on this issue. But before we get into that, we have a sponsor, so I'm gonna chuck it to the sponsor, one-handed chuck, then bring it back over here and talk about it on the other side. Did you know that burglary is up 35% nationwide? Are you aware of the fact that burglary actually has one of the lowest clearance rates, which is actually pretty horrible, because on average, a burglary in theft and damages will cost you $2,800. Well, this is one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be partnering with today's sponsor, because I refuse to be a victim, and you shouldn't be a victim either. And today's sponsor is www.camerabulb.com. This little device will help you capture evidence if the worst case scenario happens. It plugs right into your light socket, so it has that stealth element to it, works on Wi-Fi, and has an SD card slot, meaning you can store hours and hours of footage. If somebody breaks into your place, don't rely on law enforcement to do some forensic tests that they're never going to do. Get the evidence of the perpetrators yourself, so that way you can actually hold them accountable. That's camerabulb.com, camerabulb.com. So normally what we would do on this channel is make fun of the Young Turks. Normally we would point out when Cenk changes his position, because typically what he does is not acknowledge the fact that he changed his position. He would just go on like everything's usual, so I would go back, pull up the clip, throw it in your face, and show you how dead wrong Cenk is. But one of the things that I noticed during one of these rants that's been circulating on the internet.com is the fact that Cenk genuinely acknowledges his trajectory on the defund the police movement and actually points out that he was dead wrong, and he was dead wrong due to pressure on this issue from social media. So I'm going to play that clip, and by the way, it's mid-meltdown, and I'll leave the link to the full clip in the description so you can watch it, so we can all absorb it and actually acknowledge when Cenk is being honest.
And so, look, guys, let's keep it real on defund the police. It polls at negative 17%. If you love it, you're in the minority. Massive, massive minority. And I've gone back and forth on it, okay? Because in the beginning, I hated it. I thought it was such a stupid framing. I'm like, wait, are you actually going to defund the entire police department? I wouldn't even be in favor of that. They're like, oh, no, we're not going to. Then why did you call it defund the police? Why did you call it the thing it's not? It doesn't make any sense, right? And then, but I hate what the cops are doing in this country, right? So I wanted police reform so bad. I wanted criminal justice reform so bad. So at some point I was like, well, God damn it, screw it. Okay, fine, defund the police, right? But I was wrong. I shouldn't have given into that instinct of agreeing to something that I knew didn't make any goddamn sense. And to be honest, there's a world of pressure out there. If you don't say defund the police, the Twitter, patrol comes by. Oh, you are against black. You love cops. You love propaganda. You want to get more money. No, God damn it, I want to reform the cops. How'd that work out for you, defund the police, knuckleheads? How did it work out? Now we have less reform. We have way less reform. And we have Joe Biden out there going, oh, I'm going to give the cops even more money. Oh, I'm not with the defund the police people. And then they lie about all of our candidates, and it helps to end all their careers. So look, it's okay. I just told you in the middle of this story that I'm was wrong in the middle, right? Where I was like, okay, maybe we should do defund the police because I can't stand what the cops are doing in abusing minorities in this country, right? And being above the law. Well, no, it's okay. You could say you're wrong. It's not that big a deal. But no. My career is based on me being an author of Defund the Police. My career, my people on Twitter will yell at me. Oh, no, I'm Defund the Police all the way. I think it's working. Is it? Come on, don't be ridiculous. If you're a left-wing activist, is Defund the Police working?
Look, I follow TYT, and in other videos where they talked about criminal justice reform and how they were against the outcomes that they advocated for without acknowledging that it was, in fact, exactly what they advocated for, I pointed that out to you. But right there, Cenk is being 100% honest, above board, and even though he's yelling and he's angry at the left, it is, in fact, factually based. Cenk was against defund the police. I could pull up videos from 2 years ago when this slogan became popularized, where Cenk was saying, this is a terrible slogan, it's terrible marketing, and essentially he got bullied by his audience into saying that he supported it. Thus, you can find tweets and other videos of saying that he supported it. But here, he acknowledges what happened. He acknowledges how he was moved on the issue, and he says this was largely due to pressure, even though he knew in his heart of hearts he was getting on board with something that he didn't believe in. He got on board because he was angry at the police. He got on board due to left-wing pressure. And when you admit something like that, when you come to your audience and say, I was wrong, here's why I was wronged, I'm a little bit ashamed of being wrong about this, even though I knew I was wrong when I was promoting it, you gotta get credit. Anytime you take a risk like that, anytime you acknowledge fault, and this is one of the big criticisms I have of the Young Turks because they almost never seem to do this, you deserve credit for that. But Cenk actually goes one step further, and he points to the polling, and he points to specific races where defund the police may have cost, or was about to cost, certain candidates their job.
And guys, I'm going to ask one more time, okay? Who votes on this crap? I didn't vote on it. Did you vote on it? It polls at like 3%. So, Ilhan Omar nearly lost her race because she actually was for defund the police. That one was not a lie. 79% of African Americans in her district hated defund the police, and they nearly threw her out. If you're hearing something else, it's left-wing lying to you, okay? No, she almost lost the race, and it was definitely because of defund the police. The polling indicates it. People in her district said, I don't like it because she wanted to defund the police and she voted for that bill in Minnesota. Oh, no, don't believe the voters. Don't believe black and brown voters. I am a left-wing activist on Twitter. I am more important. I have decided that this is the slogan we're going with. Who the are you? Sorry. But who are you? Who made you a left-wing god? Why am I not allowed to disagree? Why are the voters not allowed to disagree with it? Why are 79% of black people in Minnesota not allowed to disagree with it? Who elected you? Stop with the dumb ass slogans that no one in the country is in favor of.
This is 100% true, and it's refreshing to hear it from the Young Turks. And by the way, I wish that Ilhan Omar lost her congressional seat. I think that symbolically removing these politicians that are for defund the police, that champion abolishing the police, that promote this nonsense, even in their left-wing districts, is absolutely paramount for us to move forward as a country. This is one of the reasons why I was a big hyper of the Chesaboudin recall, because it says something to remove that person from office. This is one of the reasons why I really wanted the Garcon recall to go through, but all of a sudden the Democrats cared about signature verification, so that recall petition was killed before it ever began. This is one of the reasons why I'm a huge hyper of Lee Zeldin running for governor against Kathy Hochul, because Kathy Hochul refuses to get off board with the automatic guaranteed release for violent repeat offenders. That is bail reform on New York State's level, which, by the way, is the only state in the union that has it, although Illinois is going to join us soon because you recently passed a similarly stupid law. And I want Lee Zeldin to win, and it's why he has a chance of winning. Cenk is right in his analysis of this. However, I do want these progressives to be gone, because once people start to see that this is an election-losing issue, even in the bluest of blue districts, we will start to see movement in terms of policy, and maybe we can nip this crime wave before it even occurs. I don't want to go through the horrors of the 80s and the 90s before people realize that going soft on crime, pretending criminals the victims, is not a good solution. We don't need to repeat history. We can alter our destiny. It is in our own hands. It's not written in stone. So yeah, Cenk, perfectly right on his analysis that this is a stupid position. However, there are some points where he tries to weasel around the fact that this is the progressive position and why the progressives are losing. Now, I'm going to jump to another video where they're breaking down the midterms, and again, I'm just going to double up on the fact that I support the Young Turks when they are correct on issues and when they are correct in their analysis.
Jury's in. It looks like the Democrats are going to lose the midterms. So there's now enough polling to show you that they don't have enough time to turn around. There's about 3 weeks left. And in order for things to turn around, the Democrats would have to actually fight back. And I'm going to show you how they can fight back in a second. But you know Democrats, other than a couple of them like Fetterman and Ryan, nobody's ever going to fight back. So it looks like we're toast. So Republicans have an advantage that Anna explained, 6 points in Congress, about a 5-point swing now, generic Republican versus Democrat in terms of party loyalty, now 4-point advantage to the Republicans, 18-point swing, 18-point advantage now among independent women. So, okay, there goes the potential Roe advantage. So it's a rebuttable presumption. It's not, you don't put it in stone, right? But right now it looks like Republicans are going to take the House. So now, second thing that's important, of course, is the policies and why it happened, right? So inflation is a giant part of it. I'm going to get to that in a second. But crime, here at TYT, we warned folks that this is going to be a big issue. And as always, they shot the messenger. So since we're the messenger, we get shot on a regular basis and from every quarter, right? So we've been calling out the right wing for 20 years straight. They've been shooting at us for 20 years straight. Then we call out establishment Democrats and they say, oh no, Hillary Clinton's got this. No, it's you messengers that are the problem. The American people love the establishment. Oops, we were right, they were wrong. They learned nothing from it. We said, don't do the Iraq war. We were right, they were wrong. I can give you dozens of examples.
So one of the things you absolutely have to love about Cenk and the Young Turks is the fact that Cenk specifically will always take every opportunity to inflate his ego. So right there, he's going to talk about how the Democrats are losing, and losing particularly on crime. However, Cenk is saying, I was right about crime. I was right that this was going to be a big issue, and here's all the other times I was right, even though they're definitely not other times that he was right. First of all, the Republicans haven't been going after the Young Turks for 20 years. They've been going after the media in general, with a few blips here and there where they target Cenk, because Cenk overplays his importance in this statement. So obviously inflating your own ego, but whatever. Secondly, his whole point about Hillary Clinton and the establishment and how they were right in 2016, everybody knew to a certain extent that Hillary was unpopular except for the media class. So I give Cenk credit in that regard, but I do want to point out that Joe Biden is just as establishment as Hillary Clinton, and he ended up winning in 2020, and he won the Democratic primary even greater margins than Hillary Clinton. So Cenk, you're not right about people's feeling about the Democratic establishment versus the progressives. The progressives are far more hated. So stop trying to pat yourself on the back too much because you thought Bernie Sanders was going to run away with it, and me over here on this channel, a year out from the Democratic primary, looked at Joe Biden's black support and knew that he was going to run away with it after South Carolina. Go back and play back the tapes on who predicted that, even if Bernie had an early lead in the primary.
They never learned anything from it. What do? Shoot the messenger. And now the left wing is doing it. So the extreme left says, no, in the midst of an increase in crime, we should pretend that there isn't an increase in crime, and we should talk about absurd things like abolishing prisons. Okay, we told you that's not going to play well. We were 100% right. And then they're like, no, it's okay. This problem will be solved if we just shoot the messenger. Okay, that's just not how it works. I mean, I wish all these people were Young Turks viewers, and we had the kind of power that the establishment thinks we have, the left wing and the right wing think we have, because then we could influence them to vote against Republicans. But these folks are voting this way whether we like it or not. Our job is to tell you about it. We did, and unfortunately, we were right again.
So you have Cenk right there laying out the case. He calls it the extreme left, but I would call it the progressive left, basically costing the Democrats the elections. And by the way, they are. The idea that you're going to deny the increase in crime and think that that's going to be successful for you is absolutely disastrous. And by the way, TYT does frame this well with the numbers early on. And what you find out is even the Democratic Party knows that crime is going up, and they blame the woke left for the crime increase.
They asked the survey takers, do you think crime is rising, dropping, or staying the same? Now, what's incredibly frustrating is I keep hearing this talking point from the left about like, oh yeah, well the crime isn't as bad as it was in the 90s. Oh yeah. Really? Like, that's a terrible talking point.
All right, so look, maybe I'm going to get a little bit conspiratorial right here. Maybe I'm going to get a little bit crazy. But is Ana Kasparian watching my videos? Is Ana Kasparian getting her talking points directly from me on this issue? I don't know, but what I will say is that nobody on the internet.com mocks the crime is not as high as it was in the 1990s more than I do. In fact, I pointed out on my blog post, actualjusticewarrior.com/blog, the only one that's there, maybe I'll post more eventually, but probably not because I'm too lazy to write things out, that the crime increase that we're experiencing, or that we experienced from 2020 to 2021, year over year in terms of homicides, was the greatest increase that we saw in 20 years. And while you can point out that murder is nowhere near as high as in the 1990s, you have to also remember that crime was insanely high in the 1990s. And when you're looking year over year and you're seeing dramatic increases, the greatest increase in 30 years year over year, this is significant. We're obviously ending up aiming in the wrong direction, and that should be noted. But the way that Ana Kasparian refuted that is almost identical to the way that I talk about the 90s increase. Now, I'm not saying anything because Ana Kasparian did block me on Twitter, so maybe she doesn't see my videos like that, but I do think she's subscribed. But this isn't the first time. There was another video where Ana Kasparian talked about incarceration and one of the arguments about prisons not being meant to rehabilitate, and this is identical to arguments that I put forward related to this topic.
Prisons and how they need to be reformed. Like, if we don't provide ways to rehabilitate people as they're incapacitated, as they're in custody, again, it doesn't matter how long they serve behind bars. If the environment in which they're being held turns them into hardened criminals, well, then that's not a justice system. That's not helping anyone. I know that there are some people out there who think, well, the prison system is not about rehabilitation. It's about taking people who pose a threat to public safety, taking them out of that environment and incapacitating them and punishing them.
Now again, tinfoil hat on the table. I'm not saying it's 100% confirmed, but there's something very particular about that verbiage related to how prisons aren't meant to rehabilitate. They're meant to incapacitate, remove people from societies. That is almost verbatim things that I've said in multiple videos related to the incarceration system. In fact, one of these points came up in a video where I defended Ana against somebody who was further left than her that was talking about this person who was released over and over again who eventually attacked a subway worker. But the tinfoil evidence gets even more tinfoily because listen to what Ana Kasparian brings up next.
I keep hearing this talking point from the left about like, oh yeah, well the crime isn't as bad as it was in the 90s. Oh yeah. Really? Like, that's a terrible talking point, especially for people who have been victimized by crime. If someone like the woman whose dog was beaten to death in Park Slope, Brooklyn, if you tell that woman, well, I mean, yeah, this is bad, but you know, crime isn't as bad as it was in the 90s. You think that that's gonna console her? You think that she's gonna be supportive of the party that gives her that messaging? No, of course not.
Now again, I'm not saying anything. I'm not making any conspiratorial leaps of faith. But I did do a video specifically on the neighborhood watch that formed after that dog was beaten to death in Park Slope, Brooklyn. We're talking about the Moose story. And by the way, there's a follow-up to that where the woman tried to find the guy that beat her dog to death, ended up finding him, and then got beaten by the guy again because he was still out there, never been caught, etc. And now Ana Kasparian randomly brings up that story that I did basically a whole video focusing on. So my tinfoil hat is tinfoiling. My exact talking points repeated with topics that I've talked about all in the same time. I think I am the mastermind of the internet. Yes, this is getting a little bit crazy. Yes, this is getting off the rails. But regardless, again, if people agree with me, whether they get it from me or not, I'm going to celebrate. But let's roll into the next portion of the conversation because I think this is amazing.
But nonetheless, let's go to this graph, this pie chart, I should say. Do you think crime is rising, dropping, or staying the same? And they break it down based on, party. And it shows that 55% of Democratic voters believe that crime is in fact rising. It's unsurprising that the GOP number is much higher at 81%. And that's because their candidates talk about crime and pretty much nothing else, and inflation, of course. And then the important number here is the independent voters. 60% of independent voters do believe that crime is rising.
Now, I referenced those polls earlier on in the video, and I do want to have a little bit of caution associated with crime polling because people tend to always say, on average in the United States of America, that crime is increasing even when it's decreasing, and this is largely due to the fact that we have local news reports, and local news is often driven by crime because those are the things in your local area. Also, there are big cities like Baltimore and Philadelphia that have had crime increases compared to the overall country, which was decreasing at other points in times in the United States of America. But I do want to point out that right now, crime is increasing in the country, and Democrats and independents, way too many of them, are completely wrong on this issue. Well, some of them say that it's actually staying the same, not necessarily going down, but in this year that they did the poll, it should be 100% because the answer is 100%, and the Republicans are more accurate on this, and I point this out because Anna's going to talk about perception, but in reality, the reality is crime is going up, not just the perception of crime is going up.
So the perception here is important. Regardless of the debates about the numbers and whether or not the numbers are even accurate, I think there's actually a lot of underreporting when it comes to crime. A lot of people don't report crimes that happen to them. It doesn't even matter, right? You could squabble over the numbers. Fact of the matter is, voters think that crime is up and they're concerned about it. Let's go to the final graph here. Do you think that the increase in crime is the fault of woke politicians or other factors? Even 52% of Democratic voters, Democrats, registered Democratic voters, blame the so-called woke politicians. And among independents, that number jumps up to 60%.
Yeah, we're toast.
So I just want to point out how devastating this is for the progressive left, because not only does the majority of Americans believe that crime is increasing, which by the way is true, but the majority of those people blame the progressive left, the woke politicians in particular, which is absolutely disastrous.
So 60-40 losing independence is good night, Irene. And they're not just blaming the left for crime. They're using weirdo Republican propaganda talking points like wokeism. I don't even know what that means in regards to criminal justice reform or what they're referring to, right? But it doesn't matter. Even 52% of Democrats think that.
Now, Cenk says he doesn't know what the woke left is. He doesn't know what that means, but even the Democrats have bought into that propaganda. But in reality, we all know what the woke left is. These are the people who think that the problem with the criminal justice system is a lack of equity, a lack of representation, that disproportionately certain groups are in prison more, and that must be due to racism, when in reality, that is due to higher levels of violent crime, which is why we expect disproportionate outcomes. If one group commits way more murders than another group, we shouldn't be surprised that they're not equally represented in prison in terms of serving murder sentences. And this is true all the way down the line. The people who think that we should deny crime and arrest poverty as the solution are the woke left. The people who think that shoplifting is just a property crime and no big deal, we shouldn't arrest these people, we shouldn't prosecute them, we should decriminalize it, are the woke left. I can go example after example. The people who are for same-day automatic release, like in New York State's bail reform law, are the woke left. Alvin Bragg, who doesn't charge anybody with crimes at all, he releases people automatically, downgrades charges time and time again, but then Jose Alba defends himself against an attacker on video, and all of a sudden he drops the hammer on him. Those people are the woke left.
Look at that, crime is up. Independents say, 16% of independents say, yes, crime is up. Only 11% say it's down. Gee, I wonder what people are thinking. It's not complicated, okay? The numbers are right there. We didn't make up the numbers. And if you're burying your head in the sand, if you're on the left, you're doing the same thing that Trump people do. They just bury their head in the sand. I don't see any stolen documents. I don't see him being an idiot, right? Oh, I don't see it at all. I don't see any of the crimes. I don't see a con man. And you guys are saying, I don't see crime going up. I don't see the whole country saying crime is going up. I don't see that costing us in the elections. Well, you're trying super hard not to see it. It's right there.
Now, Cenk's response to this is hilarious. He's basically saying that the progressive running for mayor, Bass in LA, is not a real progressive, and endorsing Caruso, who is in fact a Republican billionaire who just stopped being a Republican 8 days ago in order to run for mayor in LA, because he has a plan and Cenk does not like the state of Los Angeles. Now, this tweet is from a few days ago in response to somebody saying, "Are you voting Caruso?" And he says, "Yes." Karen Bass's main message seems to be that she is an establishment Democrat with no interest in parentheses, who thinks things in LA are generally fine, parentheses, they're not, and will work the system better. The problem is the system. There's nothing but incompetence and corruption here. We need change. Now, this is a part of a long string of tweets that came from Cenk that started off by complaining about the decay of Los Angeles. LA is a mess. There's trash all over the roads. Cops don't respond to calls. It's close to anarchy. Is Garcetti already in Mumbai? Is anyone running the city? Karen Bass seems to be saying she's going to maintain the status quo. She knows how to work the system. No thanks. Now look, while it is in part disingenuous for Cenk to frame Karen Bass, who is somebody that Cenk would likely have supported in a congressional run, as the establishment, which he always says is opposite of the progressives, I actually don't mind Cenk's poor framing of this, because what he's trying to do is essentially fit the square peg in the round hole. Cenk wants to vote for the billionaire ex-Republican because he says he's going to do something about crime. And give him credit, Caruso's like, listen, we're gonna do temporary shelters immediately so we can get these people off the streets, because the number one issue is to get rid of the blight, the horrors that are going on in LA, and we're gonna stop letting people run the city into the ground, throw trash everywhere, and lead to urban decay. Karen Bass is in favor of one of these broad housing building things that's never going to get built, that's going to cost a ton of money, that's just a way for her to do kickbacks to people that are connected to her campaign, and Cenk is calling that out. But overall, make no mistake about it, Caruso is the more conservative candidate, but what Cenk is trying to say is that essentially on the local level, he wants a more conservative candidate. He wants somebody who's actually going to staff up the LAPD, who's actually going to do the work in order to clean up the city. And by the way, this should be surprising to nobody. Cenk Uygur, while Michael Bloomberg was in office, before a bunch of the stuff about Stop and Frisk came out, was a huge fan of Michael Bloomberg. He really liked him. He compared him to an FDR type figure, even though later on he ultimately ended up hating him. And this is because New York City was a lot cleaner under Michael Bloomberg. Cenk wants the public order stuff to be enforced in the city of LA, just like he liked it in the city of New York. And this makes a lot of sense because Cenk himself is a Republican that became a progressive leftist. So while I could go out of my way to point out all the ways that Cenk is inaccurately framing Karen Bass as not a progressive in order to fit it within his ideology, I think it's good overall to elect a more tough on crime mayor, somebody who's actually going to deal with the issue of homelessness, because contrary to what the progressive left says, it is not compassionate to allow these people to wallow in squalor on the streets because you don't want to quote unquote criminalize poverty. You need to get them off the streets. You need to enforce public order. It's destroying the city. And people in Los Angeles, people in California, people in New York City pay way too much in taxes for this kind of nonsense to go on. Remember what they always tell you. The reason you pay more in taxes is because you get more public services. Well, the taxes are there and they're going up, but the public services aren't there. So I understand the frustration from somebody like Cenk Uygur, who makes a lot of money. He's a successful guy and he has to deal with all this nonsense, and they refuse to do anything to address it. So yeah, Cenk is right to endorse Caruso over Karen Bass. He's wrong in his framing of her as not the progressive, and it is funny to see people do quote tweets and call Cenk racist. But overall, taking everything into account, in totality, I think Cenk and the Young Turks, especially him and Ana, are 100% right on this, and I support them in them moving to the right direction. We have to actually get a hold of this problem before it gets out of hand, so it's far more important for us to make common cause with people that agree with us rather than fight it out over other issues that we disagree with. Cenk acknowledged that he was wrong getting on board with defund the police, so him making that effort, him actually acknowledging his own faults, I think he deserves a lot of credit for, even if he's being disingenuous about who's the more progressive candidate in the mayoral race, because we all know Karen Bass is the answer, and that's exactly the problem. Cenk is experiencing what a lot of people experience when they get what they want. They realize it's not what they bargained for, and they're unhappy with it, and we can either make fun of it, or actually extend our hand out and say, all right, let's start to solve these problems. We can make fun of Cenk for mocking people like Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan for leaving the city, but in reality, Cenk is sounding like somebody who is not happy with the city, so it seems like he should understand that a little more. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about Cenk moving in the right direction, and Ana too, on crime. Till next time.